Welcome to the 8th episode of A Safe Space on March 8th at 8 o'clock. We did not do that on purpose. I don't actually know how that happened, but here we are. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here again. 8 weeks we've been doing this. How crazy is that? So, I'm going to give everybody a minute to come on. But today I have such an amazing guest. I'm so excited to talk to Dr. Nicole Gavin from Johns Hopkins Hospital, an OBGYN resident, oh my gosh, from back in when you were a baby, when we were both babies, actually. She's actually an attending now, and she is here to talk to us about getting the COVID vaccination in pregnancy. I am so excited. I'm so excited. So here we go. I'm going to talk, though, because we always open the show with a win. So I'm going to tell you my win of the week, and I hope that you will share yours in the chat while I talk. I love talking about wins. I'm going to say this every week. It's really important to acknowledge when you have a win, because that is when you broke through. That is when you learned something. If you do not acknowledge those things, you'll just think that they happened happenstance, that they were just circumstances that happened unnatural. You didn't have anything to do with it. And that's not true. Your thoughts cause your results. I had a thought. I want to teach pregnant women about COVID and about the vaccination. I had that thought 3 months ago, 6 months ago. I mean, this is what I've been doing now for a year and some change. And I happened to see a post from Nikki Gavin, a doctor that I work with, and she had posted actually the picture that we used of herself, and she is pregnant, getting the vaccination. And I thought to myself, we have got to talk about this. And so now here we are, weeks later, and that thought created my result. I didn't get lucky. I made that happen. That is what happened, because what I want to do is teach people. And I figure they're really going to listen if I do it this way. So talk about your wins. That's not even my win. Ready for it? This is a hard one. So to this week, I want to talk about negative feedback. Negative feedback is tough. It's really tough. When we get it, we start to think things about ourselves. We start to think that maybe we're not good, that maybe we don't know what we're doing, that maybe that feedback means that we are not successful, smart, capable, good, able, all the things. But what's important to acknowledge is that negative feedback doesn't mean that. That is not what it means. Negative feedback simply means that somebody had a thought. That's all. That's all it means. Somebody had a thought. Somebody disagreed with you. That doesn't make them right or wrong. It doesn't make you good or bad. It doesn't mean anything. It's just words. So let's just acknowledge them as words. And then what we can do, once you get out of your own way, then what you can do is you can say, let's listen to those words and see if they are things that I need to look at. And so that is what I am doing this week. I received negative feedback at work. And you all know that I have been struggling with this thought, I am a good nurse. But this week was magical for me. And what happened was, when I received the negative feedback, I was able to say, this doesn't mean anything about me. This doesn't mean that I'm a bad nurse. This doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. This doesn't mean that people at work hate me. If I go down that road, if I start thinking things, because what does our brain do, right? When we get upset and stressed, our brain goes, okay, well, that wasn't fair. This was unfairly told to me. So we get really, really bogged down by the circumstances, right? She shouldn't have presented it this way. It shouldn't have been presented all at once. The words were wrong that she said. The people were wrong that were involved. We want to focus on all the circumstances, but that doesn't solve your problem. And that's why I want to talk about this today, is because I didn't go to that place. I didn't say, this is wrong to do. This is wrong to tell me. This is wrong to hear. You're doing it wrong. This is wrong. Because I didn't make it mean anything about me. And so what I said was, what should we do? What do you want to do? And so now I have a plan. Isn't that amazing? And the best part is I didn't spend 5 hours drinking and crying to my husband and calling all of my girlfriends on the phone and saying, talk me off this ledge. That didn't happen to me. I didn't let it happen. I decided to choose different thoughts. The circumstances did not matter. Yes, I received negative feedback. Okay, that's okay. And guess what? All of the feelings that I have as I'm going through this plan are also going to be okay. All of it's okay. All the feelings that come up, it doesn't mean anything. I have to keep my eye on the prize, and that is I am working on my belief that I'm a good nurse. And so that's what I'm going to do. And the phenomenal amount that this win was for me is amazing. And so I want to share it with all of you. Notice your negative feedback. Notice when you get very, very angry when someone tells you something that you don't like. Also notice that you wouldn't get upset about something that you don't believe. So for example, if I walked into this meeting and my boss had said, Tyson, everyone at work says you're boring, I would have been like, I don't think that's one I have to work on. You know, it wouldn't have hit me at all. I wouldn't have felt anything because I know that that is not true. But we get upset when we believe things are true about us. So if she had said, people at work think you're not smart, no one said that. No, I don't want to put any words on any circumstances. But if, for example, someone said to you, I don't think you're smart, or gave you evidence to that fact, they don't even have to say you're not smart. They could say, you missed this in the documentation. And immediately you think, oh, he thinks I'm not smart. Could I not be smart? It hit you because you believe it a little bit, right? Okay, so notice when those things hit you, because I'm going to say this again, your physical feelings are just your brain's way of giving you clues to your emotions. Your brain has a thought, it sends the vibration to your body, and then you think, I'm anxious. But it started up here. So if you notice your physical feelings, just get curious about them. If someone says to you, why don't I have this report on my desk? I asked for it, and you get really upset. Try to find out why. Figure it out. Are they right? Are they actually right? Were you supposed to have turned this in before or not? And does that matter? Also, keep a really open mind about whether or not it matters, because there's a real good chance it doesn't. Keep in mind, these are only their thoughts. Okay, so I'm going to stop because I know you all are so excited to hear Nikki. So I'm going to bring on my guest for tonight on the 8th episode on March 8th at 8 p.m. Here we go. So here she comes. I'm going to bring her on now. It's going to take to add her. Sometimes it takes a second. So Dr. Nicole Gavin is a GYN-OB. Oh, here she is. Look at that. That was so fast. Attending at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. This means so much to me because I just want to spread the word. You know what I mean?
I do. That's why I'm here.
Yes. So can you introduce yourself for me? Can you tell us a little bit about you? Give us a background.
Sure. So like Tyson said, my name is Nikki Gavin. I originally grew up in Connecticut, and then I went to University of Connecticut for medical school. I graduated from there in 2014 and then came here to Hopkins for my residency. I completed my OBGYN residency in 2018 here. And then I work as a attending there, but also I'm a maternal fetal medicine fellow, graduating essentially as soon as I have my baby.
Oh, and that's another thing. You're also pregnant.
Oh, yes. I should also add that I'm also pregnant. I am 32 weeks pregnant right now. And I got the COVID vaccine at 22 and 25 weeks pregnant.
22 and 5.
22, and then the second dose at 25.
Okay, gotcha. 22 and 25. Okay, so that actually is my first question. Is there a time frame, if you're pregnant, when you should get it? Like,
that's a common question I get from some of our patients. Realistically, we don't have a lot of data on the COVID vaccine during pregnancy, so we don't know that there is one specific time that's better to get it than others. I have had a lot of patients ask me, should I wait till I'm out of the first trimester to get the vaccine? And I think it's reasonable if you have a low exposure risk. We don't know that there's any negative effects, though, associated with getting it during the first trimester. Like I said, we don't have a lot of data, but has no data that has come out to say it's associated with birth defects or first trimester loss or any of those things. I really have a discussion with all my patients, and if they feel more comfortable waiting till they're out of the first trimester, so like waiting till they're past 14 weeks, then I think that is reasonable.
and why would they think that? Is it just because of the chance for miscarriage before?
The first trimester is pretty much the time where we always worry about things like that. Like the chance of miscarriage is highest in that first trimester, especially before the first 10 weeks of pregnancy.
So it probably would be a good idea then
to wait.
Yeah, if you could.
If you could, I think that is reasonable.
Okay.
I think that every patient that I talk to about this, you have to weigh your theoretical risks of the COVID vaccine, because as I said, right now we don't know of any,
right?
Versus the real risks of COVID that we do actually know right now.
So basically,
so every patient I start to have a conversation with what are, like, if you are at home in your house and you work exclusively from home and you don't even really go out and you never have like face-to-face with people, then your risk of COVID is low.
Right, of course.
And so then a lot of those people, if it makes them feel more comfortable, I would say, then wait till you're out of the first trimester.
Okay.
But if you're a frontline emergency medicine worker who's going to go in every day during the first trimester, then your risk of COVID is much more realistic than your risk of anything from the vaccine.
Right.
And so those people, we sort of have a different conversation of maybe you're not one to wait.
Are there people who should get it versus people who should not get it?
So I think, like I said, it's for me always going to be a risk benefit like ratio of what you're going to do. I think there's a reason that ACOG and SMFM specifically referenced healthcare workers, because they're at highest risk right now. I've also had this question from a couple people because now they're starting to vaccinate teachers. So I've also had some questions there, and I think that they're another high-risk population because they are going to be front and center, spending a lot of time with kids who maybe are not doing the best COVID precautions. And so I think they're another population of people that's at higher risk. And I think they're probably people that should get the vaccine.
But there's not like specifically like diabetes or obesity or anything that would keep you out of the running in terms of getting the vaccine, do you think?
No, I actually think those people should get it the most because those are the people that are most likely to get actually sick from COVID, is people who have other comorbidities, especially the obese, diabetic, autoimmune diseases. People like that are the ones that are more likely to suffer the consequences of COVID. So those are actually people that I think should get the vaccine.
Are there any groups that shouldn't, do you think?
So I actually had this conversation with someone recently, and the only data that's come out is that people who have previously had anaphylaxis to a vaccine before are more likely to anaphylax.
Right,
really,
of course.
Any vaccine, but are more likely to anaphylax to this vaccine. And so those are people that I think, if you're not frontline, if you don't have a real exposure, I would probably advise that they do not get the vaccine because you've obviously had a poor reaction to vaccines in the past.
But even if they're frontline, they should still get it. It's still worth the risk in your mind?
In my mind, yes, but I am a frontline worker.
Yeah.
And Tyson knows this from my stories, but I mean, I take call as an attending in-house, so it's me alone. And during when we were like in the thick of it and of the pandemic, there was always a COVID patient in-house.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't really I probably won't have to take care of a COVID patient tonight. We always had at least one COVID patient that needed to be taken care of.
Right.
And sometimes they were very sick. Like we accepted them as a transfer to our intensive care unit. Sometimes they were very ill. And so for me, it made me actually doing my job very difficult to be a pregnant healthcare worker who was not supposed to see COVID patients, if at all possible.
Yeah.
But I also needed to take care of patients that
Right.
came in. So it actually was very difficult for me in that time before being vaccinated, because I felt like I couldn't adequately do my job at work. And at the same time, I was still putting my family at home at risk. I have a 3-year-old and my husband is obviously not vaccinated. And so it was really a constant, I'm exposing myself, I can't take care of my patients, and I'm exposing my family.
Right. And then you come home and expose them.
Yes. So for me, like choosing to get the vaccine it wasn't really a choice. It was, for me, it was very obvious. That's what I was always going to do. In fact, I was just so glad that they did not exclude pregnant women from receiving it.
Oh, you were worried about that?
Yes, I was. They were not included in the original studies, although like some things now are coming out and trying and having more pregnant women and lactating women in the studies, but they were not included in the originals. So we just didn't have any data. So I was worried that they would say, because we don't have any data on it, we're not going to offer it to pregnant women.
Yeah.
And I actually know a lot of healthcare workers that were worried about that.
Yeah. Did it worry you at all? Was it a conversation in your head at all? Or was it like, I can't wait to get the vaccine pregnant while pregnant?
It was, like I said, I was at a point where I was really just worried about my family. And to be honest, I was also worried about being one of the very sick pregnant women that I take care of.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, for me, I was just like, I cannot wait to get it. And when the survey came up and I got my day of when I could actually go, I was like ecstatic to go.
Yeah.
Like you referenced my post. That post was really the nurse who gave me the vaccine actually took that picture, and we were like both glad together because I told her, I really want you to take my picture because I'm pregnant getting the vaccine and I'm like really happy. And she was like also equally happy and like happy to take my picture. And like, this is a nurse who is obviously like working hard giving vaccines all day. And she was like, no, let me take a second to like take your picture of you getting the vaccine.
Well, it's important. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Is to educate everybody about this. That reminds me though, I have kind of like a, so I don't know if you know anything about my show, but what we do here is we talk about our thoughts. I'm sure you got like a glimpse in my little speech at the beginning. Everything comes from our thoughts. So my question to you is, these people whose thoughts are, it's dangerous to get the vaccine, how do we educate in a way that is respectful of their thoughts also? We're not saying you're wrong, you're stupid, because that's what people are going to think if we say, no, that's not true. This is actually what's true. So my way of doing it is to have you on. But how do we start the conversation that's like on the same page, but also trying to educate that this is safe to do?
I mean, I have this conversation pretty much every day. Because whether I'm actually in clinic seeing patients or I'm on labor and delivery or I'm in ultrasounding patients, like that is probably the number one question I get now every single day when I'm at work and has been for some time.
Great.
And also from people outside of work. But so I actually very much understand being afraid because it is something new, and we haven't had really a new vaccine like this in a very long time because we haven't had something like this. So I think people are understandably afraid that they're going to sign up for something that is going to be dangerous to them. And I do actually totally get that.
Yeah.
So I just try to put it in perspective of, like, that's okay if you think that is a dangerous thing, because we don't know a lot about it. So I wouldn't judge you for thinking that. But COVID is definitely a dangerous thing.
Yes.
And so I try to put it more in that perspective, because I think we do know the risks of COVID, especially during pregnancy. So pregnant women are more likely to be hospitalized if they have COVID. They're more likely to be in an intensive care unit. They can be more likely to be intubated. And there's been a couple different publications that have come out saying they think that pregnant women can have more severe morbidity than people of their own age. Because remember, most of our pregnant patients are young, healthy women,
right,
who should not get very sick from COVID.
Right, of course.
And they are. Like,
yeah.
We are having a population of women that is getting very sick from COVID. And I think it's much more real to people to think of the dangers of a vaccine versus, like, I see every day the actual dangers of COVID, of patients that have actually died during or after their pregnancy, patients who were normal, healthy people before and were on a ventilator for 2 weeks, like things like that people end up getting delivered early that they don't need, like, which I think is one way that I also try to talk to people about it, because I think people are very afraid for their baby, which is reasonable, because that's what we care about.
Right.
As pregnant women, that's what you're worried about, is your baby going to be
course.
okay? And realistically, I was also afraid for my baby, and that's why I got vaccinated, because I didn't want the effects of COVID to make me have a very early delivery or a very sick baby.
Yeah. Well, and like, that's kind of the point, right? It's like, which fear is stronger, and that's what you decide about which way you're going to go with the vaccine. Am I more scared of COVID, or am I more scared of not knowing? Can you teach us a little bit about vaccines just in general? Like, is there anything to be afraid of if you get a vaccine just at baseline? Let's not talk about COVID.
So vaccines in general, there's a bunch of different kinds. The COVID vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. So that means that it essentially is made of mRNA, which is what codes for protein in your cells. So it actually codes for a protein that's like on the outside of the COVID virus. And so your body like forms an immune response to that. And so then when your body is exposed to that protein that's on the outside of the actual COVID virus, it will fight it.
Okay.
So you're not actually getting any portion of like virus in the
That's
COVID
an
vaccine.
mRNA vaccine.
You're getting an mRNA.
Right.
There are other viruses that are other vaccines, that are different. So there are vaccines that are called live vaccines. And what those are is like live but attenuated versions of the virus, so that your body will still form the immune response to it.
Can you define attenuated for the people?
So it's essentially like the virus has made so it can't like do its normal thing and replicate and cause harm in your body.
I use the word broken at work. Does that make sense? Or am I just making that
broken
up? Okay.
So, no, it's like a broken version of the virus.
So it cannot hurt you, is what you're saying.
Correct. However, we don't actually recommend those live vaccines during pregnancy, because of the theory that you could, in theory, have that broken virus become new again and actually replicate in your body.
Wow.
So an example of that is we give the flu vaccine during pregnancy, but we don't actually give the like intranasal one, because that's live.
That's live.
Right.
Yes.
So that's one example of those. And then there's other vaccines in different ways, and there's different, essentially what your goal of in the vaccine is to have your body make a reaction to what you're being exposed
to. Create antibodies.
Exactly. So that when you're
Yes.
exposed to the real virus, your body also attacks
It
it.
can fight it because it has the
Yeah.
antibodies. Can you tell us your story about antibodies really quick? Because you were
What was my
tested
story about
before
antibodies?
and after,
Oh yes.
right?
I was
This
like,
is
what is my
so
story about
important.
antibodies? So I was I still am part of one of the COVID like research studies, and what they wanted to do initially, but this was before the vaccine was like a realistic thing. They wanted to see how many healthcare workers had antibodies, really saying how many healthcare workers have actually been exposed to COVID that that didn't have symptoms. Like, how many people are we really talking about that got exposed to COVID? And so I got tested for those antibodies, I want to say in October, and I did not have the antibodies, meaning I had not been exposed to COVID at that point.
Okay.
Which was wonderful, obviously, but also that means I wasn't immune. So I found that fact out, and then the vaccines finally started actually coming, and I got vaccinated in December. And then more recently, my like second arm of the study where they test you again for antibodies came up, and they tested me again, and now I do have the antibodies. And specifically, one of the things they're looking at is called the spike protein, which is positive when you're vaccinated. So meaning I have positive antibodies because I was vaccinated, not because I got COVID.
Interesting. Interesting. I did not know you could tell that.
I did not know either. I recently discovered this when talking to the lab.
Protein. That's very cool.
So for me, that was very wonderful and
reassuring
because I actually had zero reaction to the vaccine.
Yeah.
And so some small part of me was like, I hope it worked.
Yeah.
But I have antibodies, so it did work.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to open this up to questions from people who are watching. If anybody has any questions for Dr. Gavin, we are here. So let's just let people ask questions. I don't know what'll happen. We'll see. But we can keep talking for just a couple minutes before I let you go. Sure. What is the most popular question that you get at work from your patients about COVID vaccines, whatever?
Should I get the vaccine?
Like, really? It's that easy?
Yep. Everyone, and it's for all different reasons. I have people say, I'm in my first, like, I am this far into my pregnancy. Should I get the vaccine? I'm almost done with my pregnancy. Should I wait or should I just get the vaccine? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about becoming pregnant in the next couple months. Should I get the vaccine? Mm-hmm. I have diabetes and I'm obese and I know I have other medical problems. Should I get the vaccine?
Yeah.
And pretty much, I mean, like I said, I try not to, like, that's not my decision. So I try to always have a discussion with every patient of, okay, what is beneficial to you about getting the vaccine and what is risky for you about getting the vaccine. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think that almost all of my patients, after like really thinking about what's going on, have ultimately decided to get it.
Yeah. Is that true?
I mean, all of the ones that I've talked to.
That's wonderful.
I think the majority of them have ultimately decided to, because they really did think about their risks themselves. Mm-hmm. And most of them have some degree of risk.
So would you suggest, now I know the answer to this question, I'm being a little sarcastic, but I'm doing it to make a point. Do you suggest Googling this information if you're pregnant? And what I mean by that is,
I don't suggest Googling anything when you're pregnant because it always takes you to like a horrible, horrible place.
Right.
And all my patients know, they'll come in and be like, I Googled this last night. And I'm like, don't do it.
Me too. I know.
Only because because there's not good information out there, but there's also bad information.
Yes, and you don't know the difference. That's why you shouldn't Google. But my real question is, without the sarcasm, where can they look up this information? Where can they get the right, good information?
So I think the CDC is always a pretty safe bet because they post actual like scientific studies there. They post actual recommendations. There's nothing like fluff about the CDC. So that's always like a safe bet. And they have resources specifically for patients. So it's like, if you want to read a full scientific article all about like mRNA vaccines, you can do that there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also read the like little blurb of like, this is what an mRNA vaccine is. This is like why it's safe, blah, blah, blah. Like, I actually
Cliff's Notes.
yeah, I actually looked it up recently because I wanted to know, like, okay, what are you actually looking at? And you can get like sort of, and it's like those little questions, so patients can be like, oh, I have a question about like what is this vaccine, or like why should I get it, or blah blah blah, and they literally have little questions and like a little answer. So the CDC is always safe.
Okay.
I think the fact that SMFM, which is the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, so that's like the governing body of like high risk pregnancies, and ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, both endorsed giving the vaccine during pregnancy.
Okay.
I think that was a pretty telling thing. So if you have any resources that are actually from SMFM, or if you Google like SMFM or Google ACOG, they have a lot more helpful things also on
Wonderful.
Vaccine and pregnancy, and just COVID and pregnancy in general.
Excellent. This
you
is so good.
All those things through, you can study all those things through Google.
Technically, Google gets you there, but please just don't Google, should I get the vaccine in pregnancy?
Yes. Also, I love Facebook because of things like this, where we can talk to people and everything, but Facebook also has like lots of articles that are like not really research.
Yes.
Circulating.
Yes. Also, so as a pregnancy life coach is sort of what I do. I say sort of. Jesus, I need to work on my thoughts. So that is what I do. So I am in a bunch of like mommy groups, and mommy groups will ask a medical question in their group, and then they will get 15 or 20 different responses from like Facebook people, like strangers.
Yes. And sometimes those groups are really helpful, truly.
Mm-hmm. Like,
but
if
not
I'm
everybody on them knows what they're talking. But not everybody knows. Well, because I'm like on one of those groups for I joined when I was breastfeeding my daughter, about breastfeeding specifically. And what you realize on it is some of the things are so good and so helpful, but there's no screening of what people say. So you can also say crazy things that like is not helpful to anyone, or is like just downright wrong. Yeah. So really, as long as you just take it with a grain of salt, you're probably fine.
Yes. We have a question, and then I want to talk about the vaccination while breastfeeding.
Sure.
But the question is from Donna Gavin, and she says, is it known if the baby will have antibodies to the novel coronavirus if the mom has been vaccinated? What a great question.
That is a great question.
Who's Donna Gavin? Is that your mother?
That's my mother-in-law. So thanks,
Donna Gavin.
No, that is actually a really good question. They are currently doing a lot of studies at centers across the country looking at the answer to that exact question. It's like they're trying to test both mom's breast milk and test the actual babies to see. But my understanding is so far, yes, they think the babies are getting antibodies for the vaccine, which is even more why you should, like, if at all possible, breastfeed afterwards. You're literally protecting. You should get the vaccine, and because then you'll have antibodies for your baby also while breastfeeding. Yes.
Oh my gosh, great question. So that actually made me think of something else too. We could just do this all night, honestly, but I'm going to wrap it up very soon, I promise. My last question, this isn't even really about the vaccine at all, but can you tell us your experience at work with the moms who are COVID positive and then the babies being born negative? Like, are you seeing the virus go to the baby, or are you seeing healthy babies being born, or what's your experience been?
So at our hospital, we're in general seeing babies without coronavirus being born, like they're not getting it. There is some data that they can get it in utero, and I know there's been other centers where the baby has tested positive so soon afterwards, it's not possible that they acquired it during the delivery, or or because people weren't taking care afterwards, it
Mm-hmm.
has actually been transmitted like transplacentally at some
Mm-hmm.
point. So that can happen, but it is not an especially common thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so at our hospital, we've been trying just to do the best afterwards to keep. And I think at the beginning, it was a learning experience
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah.
what do we do when you have a COVID positive mom and in theory, a COVID negative baby?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think our NICU and our nursery have been doing a lot of really good work with that to figure out, okay, like, do we separate?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do initially? And then really, they're going to go home together though. So you really need to make a plan of like, we need to do something feasible in the hospital that's
Mm-hmm.
also feasible at home.
Yeah.
So I know that the moms are getting taught like about wearing gloves and their masks and everything at all times. And I think it has actually kept the transmission between mom and baby low. And as I said before, we encourage breastfeeding because the baby is actually going to get protective antibodies through breastfeeding.
Yes, absolutely. I had one more question for you, and it is final question, I promise. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What can we expect? How can we expect to be protected once we are vaccinated? Could I typically like go out without a mask on if I wanted to and be protected from COVID, or what's the deal there?
This is actually a very timely question because the CDC just came out and changed their like recommendations for vaccinated individuals. I think today or yesterday.
I think it was today.
I think it was today. And they essentially said that vaccinated people can be in small groups, unmasked, with other vaccinated people.
Okay.
That they still recommended that if you're going to go into a large group, if you're going to be around anyone who's not vaccinated, if you're going to be like going out to the grocery store, anywhere where there's like things that are shared, that you do wear your mask and you keep your 6 feet of separation. You do your like normal COVID precautions, even though you're vaccinated.
And is that for me, or is that because I heard yesterday somewhere from someone that we could still transmit it, but we couldn't get it?
So it's actually to protect both of you, because just because you got the vaccine does not mean you cannot get COVID. It means if you're going to get it, it's usually a much milder version,
right?
But it's not impossible for you to get it. So, so you're still exposing yourself, and in that way, you're also still exposing others because you can still get a milder version, which is in some ways dangerous because you have a mild version, you don't think you really have anything, and then you can infect other people.
Yeah.
So it's really for everyone's benefit that we're still recommending. But the reason that they changed their guidelines is because if everyone is vaccinated there, the risk of transmission is so low.
Okay. Well, I have 5 more just in listening to you. So I'm going to stop. But thank you so much for being here. I really can't thank you enough. I know that your schedule must be madness, especially with a baby on the way. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to teach us. Thank you very much.
Of course. I'm more than happy to do anything so that more people feel safe getting vaccinated.
Yes, absolutely. If I get more questions, I'll field them to you. How about that?
Yeah, you can send them to me.
Okay. Thanks, Nikki. Okay. I'm going to let you go. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, man. I feel like every episode is just, I'm so energized. This is such good stuff. Look at what we're doing. We're changing the world. Oh, man. Well, that's it. Episode 8 of A Safe Space on March 8th at 8 p.m. For some reason. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned a ton. I hope that you are feeling your feelings, you're allowing everything, and you're noticing your thoughts. If you have any concerns or questions, or you're just sad and you want to talk, call me. I'm here. This is what I do. I want to talk about all your thoughts and feelings. All of them are fine. All of them are safe. You're in a safe space. I'll see you next time. Love ya.